All right, good day, class. I am recording this lecture video to somehow assist us in our discussions, especially in missed meetings that we've had. So today we are going to be tackling Unit 9, talking about the position paper. Let's discuss the features and purposes of a position paper. So for this particular lesson, we are going to be tackling a very important topic because this will help us dedicate a very important aspect as to how we can become or how we can enhance academic writing. So when we want to defend a particular belief of ours and gain more support for it, we write a position paper. What exactly is a position paper and what are its parts and features? Those are the two of the basic questions that we are going to be answering when we are going to be tackling in this particular lesson. Okay, for this particular lesson, we have the following objectives. First, understand the use and purpose of a position paper. Identify the features and structure of a position paper. Now, there are different questions or many questions that could come into mind when we talk about a position paper. But two of the most common prevalent are the following. Firstly, what is needed to write a position paper? Unsay kinahanglan para makasulat ta og position paper? And what are the important features of a position paper? In order for us to distinguish a position paper from a concept paper, from a proposal paper, what are the different features that is very important in emphasizing that the paper that we are writing is a position paper about a certain topic, issue, or idea? Now, let's try to explain what is a position paper. Firstly, a position paper is another form of academic writing that is written after reading about and discussing a particular issue. Take note that when you write a position paper, you have already read about it and you have already discussed about the particular issue in which you are going to write the position paper. It uses formal academic language and has an introduction, body, and conclusion. Much of our discussions, we always deal with these three elements: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. However, class, the aspects of which it includes are different because firstly, we include a formal academic language or we use a formal academic language. And take note going back that a position paper is a result of something or a written or is written after we have read and after we have discussed a particular issue. Writing a position paper entails a lot of research and gathering information and evidence. That is why it is very difficult and complex because you have to research a lot of data, a lot of sources, and you have to gather a lot of information and evidences to support your position. Standard rules for citing sources, paraphrasing, quoting, and avoiding plagiarism apply. It's very important, especially that when we are writing a position paper, we observe the standard rules of citing sources, paraphrasing, and quoting in order for us to avoid plagiarizing ideas that are not ours to begin with. This is also very important because we are giving our opinion, part and parcel. We are giving our opinion about a particular issue. Okay? Now, remember that a position paper is not simply a reporting of the issue at hand. It involves actively choosing a side and supporting it, even if it means encountering resistance and opposition. In a position class, in an issue class, when you take a position, there is always the positive and the negative, the pro and the con, the benefit and the advantage and the disadvantage. Okay, so in a position paper, we are going to be proactively making a choice, choosing a side and supporting that side in which you have chosen. How? By the evidences, the data, the sources that you're going to use in presenting the argument or presenting your side. And take note that when you have a position paper written, this will always encounter resistance or opposition just to make sure that what you have written is in accordance, meaning to say tama gyud or kana bang strong or naay basis ang imong ginasulat. Now, what is the purpose or what are the purposes of a position paper? The purpose of a position paper is to generate support for a particular side on an issue. It should describe the side you have taken on an issue and the rationale for that position. Nganong imo siyang gitake nga side sa issue and nganong imo siyang suportahan. Okay? It should be based on facts and evidence that provide a solid foundation for your arguments. And a position paper is a critical examination of a side using relevant evidence and inductive reasoning. Inductive meaning to say from greatest to least ang imong reasoning. So you're going to present your reasons why from the greatest points down to the least or lesser points. Position papers are always tied to a particular issue or event. There are sides to these issues that spark debate and discussion. A position paper for your side adds your voice in support of that position. That could lead to even more support from others. Now, one of the tips that I want you to remember is that whenever a particular issue becomes controversial and causes sides to form, that is an indication that a position paper could be written about that issue. However, if that particular issue causes a passive reaction and does not indicate that a position should be made, then there is no strong basis for your position paper. Okay? Now let's talk about the different features of a position paper. A position paper also follows the structure of having an introduction, body, and conclusion. That's a general rule. The introduction of your position paper should accomplish the following: introduce the topic or the issue, provide the background information on the issue to explain its importance, and give and assert your thesis statement, which is your view or take on the issue. Not just the background information, but also what is your take on the issue as an individual or as a writer, showcasing critical thinking. What do you think about, or what is your take about that particular issue? Example: most schools implement a school uniform policy. It is rare for schools, especially for their students in primary school and high school, to let their students wear whatever they want. It is practically a status quo by now, and very few schools, if any at all, have removed their policy for mandatory school uniforms. Requiring school uniforms, however, is an outdated and restrictive school policy which does more harm than good, and so should be abolished. So the idea or the issue here is the wearing of, or the mandatory wearing of, school uniforms. How that it presents, take note, the elements. It introduces the topic or the issue. Example, first sentence: most schools implement a school uniform policy. So from that sentence, or from the first sentence itself, you can already assert, or you can already infer that the paragraph or the position paper is all about the wearing of school uniform. Another, provide background information on the issue to explain its importance. Nganong importante ang issue o nganong kailangan nato mo take og position or side ani nga issue. It is rare for schools, especially for their students in primary school and high school, to let their students wear whatever they want. It is practically a status quo by now, meaning to say, mahulog siya nga, hinder siya because there is classicism. Kung kinsa to nindot og wow, mo to'y mabilong sa mga higher level or higher society. Kung kinsa tong dili kay nindot og wow, mo to sila ang ginadim nga mga lower members of society. So that is now presenting the background information on the issue that explains the importance of the issue. And then you're going to assert your thesis statement, meaning to say your view or your own take on the issue. Example: requiring school uniforms is an outdated and restrictive school policy which does more harm than good and so should be abolished. So mo na imong gibarugan nga kung mag-require ka magpasuot og school uniform, outdated na siya and restrictive siya nga school policy. Kay for example, what if dili tanan ang maka-afford mo palit og school uniform? So that is now your basis for your argument. So ang imong side diha is that it is outdated, it is a restrictive school policy, and it does more harm than good. Therefore, it should be abolished. Okay? So that is an example of a position, of an introduction of a position paper. Okay. Let's talk about the body. The body of your position paper contains your arguments in support of your chosen position. This is also where your evidence supporting your arguments can be found. It can also have a section or paragraph talking about counter arguments where you address the point or points of the opposite side and then refute them. Class, if you're going to present counter arguments in your paragraph, make sure that you're going to refute them. Okay? It is a good idea to have at least three main points that defend your position. Each paragraph should contain a main point, your educated and informed opinion on the issue given this point, and support or proof from various sources that help defend your point. Meaning to say, when we talk about your points or your paragraphs containing a point, it should be educated. Meaning, class, dapat na-research na ninyo siya, na-verify na ninyo siya, your informed opinion. That your opinions are now derived from the research that you've had. Dili lang because nahimo mong emotional in dealing with the said side or topic. A paragraph on counter arguments could be helpful in proving your point. Make sure that when you're going to present counter arguments, it is leaning towards proving your point right. It should first summarize the counterclaims and provide information on them as well. Then, refute the counterclaims and provide evidence for your own counterarguments, much like supporting one of your main points. When summarizing the opposing argument, remember to present it fairly and objectively instead of trying to make it look weak. Kasi nga, it is already your opposing argument. So definitely, the idea for smart writers is that it is leaning now, or the points that you have presented are refuted, leaning to the victory or to proving your side or proving your point correct. However, you must also present it fairly and objectively rather than making it look weak or making it look without merit. You should show that you have seriously considered the many sides of the issue and are not simply attacking your opponents. Remember, class, to do not resort in fallacies, ad hominem, um, heinous generalization, etc., etc. Example: students who are preteens or teenagers are usually still forming their personal identities. According to a study by Arnett, many adolescents are still in the process of trying to integrate their prior experiences and characteristics into a more stable identity. Many of them try out different activities, interests, and clothes in an attempt to find which ones really suit them. Having these adolescents wear the same clothes 5 to 6 times a week effectively stifles their creativity and self expression. They'll have a harder time exploring and finding out their own fashion styles because they have very few chances to experiment. In fact, a local study by Professor Janine Vera states that from the five private schools that she was able to conduct a survey in, 59% of high school students were against having a school uniform policy, with 70% of them agreeing that it did not let them express themselves fully. Another study by psychologist Jacob Domingo backs this up by stating that many adolescents and teens tend to use fashion as a way to express their personal identity, and they feel that wearing uniforms for a majority of the week really suppresses their individuality and sense of self. Okay, so if you can see here in the second example, it talks about all the features of a position paper, a body of a position paper. Okay, no need for us to go back one by one. However, it presents evidences, it presents an educated and an informed opinion by stating studies, research studies, still citing punto per punto, why your arguments should win. Okay, example number three. A paragraph discussing a counter argument could talk about how allowing students to wear casual clothes every day will be more expensive. To refute, the author may find research that proves expenses for new uniforms yearly could be more expensive and wasteful. Now, in this particular example, when you are going to use counter arguments added to your position paper, make sure that there is always refutal. Kung moingon ka karon nga kung magsuot lang ka og casual clothes, meaning to say dili ka mag school uniform, mas gasto siya kay everyday ka magsuot og wow. I-refute nimo siya by citing a research that proves nga mas expensive ang bag-o nga uniform kada tuig. Unya, dili pa gyud mo magamit for 4 years sa imo ang high school kasi nga usahay manambok ka, usahay mo gamay ka, dili na maarang sa imo. So sayang lang. So that should be your refutal. Meaning to say, if you present a counter argument to your position paper, the refutal must be more comprehensive, and must be more critical to the point that you are trying to make, wherein you do not allow or you wanted to abolish wearing school uniform. Okay, the conclusion of your position paper should be brief, and it should mostly contain a restatement of your thesis statement. If your thesis statement is to abolish, then in the conclusion part or the conclusion of your position paper, it should restate your thesis statement. It should also give a plan of action given your position, but it should not introduce any new information. So kung unsang imong gi-state dito nga mga points supporting your general idea or your thesis statement, then there must be provided a plan of action relating to your position kung unsaon nimo siya karon, why it should be abolished, and if so abolished, what could be the possible indicators to still make it work in schools. Okay? Now, let's have the fourth example. With more and more proof emerging that school uniforms are more of a burden than a boon to students, parents, and even teachers, the policy that mandates them should be considered outdated and restrictive. Remember, class, that in the thesis statement, you use the words outdated and restrictive. So that's what you are basically supporting in your conclusion. Schools, especially those handling adolescents and teens, should consider removing this policy and allowing students to wear casual clothes so that they may express themselves more freely. Perhaps, if a compromise must be made, then the policy can be modified to be a dress code policy instead of a school uniform policy. Okay, now go back to the issue and the sides that you and your partner brainstorm. Okay, let's skip this part. All right. Much like other forms of academic writing, how should position papers be written? Which part of the position paper is considered optional? Have you determined it? So try to evaluate yourself. Asa man gyud dito ang pinaka-importante o asa man dito pwede walaon sa position paper? And how can you make sure that your opinion in the position paper is informed and educated? Balik-balikon gyud nato na that the position, that the side, that your argument should be informed and educated. Okay, let's try to wrap things up. Let's remember that a position paper is a form of academic writing that generates support for a particular side on an issue that has been discussed or read about. A position paper is written to address an issue and defend a particular stand on it. The features of a position paper are the introduction, the body that has your main points and possible counter arguments, and the conclusion. Okay. So for your guidance, these are the references used in this particular lesson. So I will be sending the activity that we are going to answer in complying with this lesson in the group chat. I hope that you listen until this very part of our video.